no one ever teaches you how to get out of a relationship in a healthy, loving.
It's astounding how few of us know how to do this.
You're the only one I know who knows how to do it. So.
I have seen the most high-level, advanced spiritual people make a total mess of, the end of a relationship.
Really?
Yeah. We just don't know how to navigate it. And I have a theory about it. I think that inside of our happily ever after myth, which kind of assumes that if the relationship ends before one or both people die, that it was a complete disaster and a complete failure of love. And so inside of that, we just never really figured out, well, how can we bring conscious completion to our intimate relationships, or to really any relationships for that matter?
I mean, why do people... And just so people listening know, you're a marriage family therapist, right?
Yes,
you've been doing this for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And you've been teaching hundreds of thousands of people all around the world about, relationship advice and all this good stuff. So you've got some great wisdom as a licensed therapist, but also with your own experiences. So I think that's where we learn the most from our own experiences, because you're divorced as well.
Yes.
And you had to figure this out for yourself also.
Well, and... let me just say, I'm also the author of Calling in the One,
yes,
right?
yes.
Which came out in 2004, and which has sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And
so you called in the one, and then
I called in the one, and then after a decade, we decided to unmarry.
So it wasn't the one anymore.
Well, he was, though, for that time.
For that time, okay.
For that time. And this goes back to the happily ever after myth, because, when we decided to end our union, I mean, it wasn't, an easy thing to do.
Sure.
And when we made the decision, my prayer was like a little less than pious. It was, are you effing kidding me, God? Like, seriously?
Right.
I'm got all these people who look to me for the answers and how to find love. And they really open up to possibility in their lives after all sorts of things. And they learn the Calling in the One technique and process, which has, worked for many, many thousands of people. But then I'm going to get divorced. So what's that message, and how do I even convey that message? So I know you love to talk in School of Greatness about failure a lot. So that was like a great crash and burn.
Sure. Yeah.
In that moment, it could have really been a disaster.
And you were the woman that was like, I'm calling the one. I'm teaching you all how to do it. And now I'm essentially failed at calling in the one.
Yeah. Well, and so you know what? I know enough to look at my own feelings and whatever's going on for me, and to see it as reflective of what's going on for all of us. So I have kind of I have a deeply personal relationship, obviously, with my feelings, as we all do.
Sure.
But I also have an impersonal relationship with them, because I'm really interested in the evolution of love in the world. Both for myself and our collective capacity.
Conscious love, yes.
Yeah, conscious love, conscious relationships. So, and I'm committed to that. So as I'm going through this, I'm going, wow, this is really common, that when we go through the end of a relationship, we feel ashamed. Where does that come from?
Why do we feel ashamed?
Why do we feel ashamed? Why do we go to, now I'm inferior to be single again, or, I was better when I was, what? Where is that coming from? So I actually started to research that happily ever after myth. And I found out a lot of things about it that were really fascinating to me. One is that it's only about 400 years old. Believe it or not, it was created in Venice, Italy.
No
which,
way.
Us romantics, we're not surprised.
That's funny.
But it was created during a time when the lifespan was under 40, when half the children were dying before the age of 16.
Really? Wow.
Which, is probably a better idea to keep families together, to give them the best possible chance at survival. And also there was a law at the time that these fairy tales were created, that a noble person could not marry a commoner. And so people, if you were born into poverty, you were going to die into poverty. There was no hope of ever getting out of poverty. So the happily ever after myth came as an escapist fairy tale for people, because it was right after the Renaissance. So people actually were literate. Even though they had no money, they were literate. And they loved the fairy tales, in large part because of the upward mobility.
Okay.
It was and also it happened in a far away distant land, because it couldn't happen in Venice because there was a law against it. So, it's but then it went to France, and it kind of stuck, and it almost took over our world about what our aspiration for love should be. And we're also kind of collectively in that trance that it actually occurs to us as a failure. if we do not. But look, this is the reality. If you look at the statistics are that the majority of us are going to have 2 to 3 major relationships in our lifetime, which also implies at least 1 or 2 major breakups as well.
Wow.
So it's no longer the norm to meet and marry one
the
person.
one, like 21 when you're in college, and then you're with them for the rest of your life.
Very unusual. I mean, it happens.
Sure.
So I think, like we update our computer programs and our child rearing practices and our diets and our exercise programs. I think we have to update our aspirations around love.
Of course.
And we need to shift from the question of, how we're going to value the union according to how long did it last, and start to ask the question, what did I learn and how have I expanded my capacity to love moving forward?
So challenging when you're in the relationship and you love someone so much, and they bring so much value to your life and they're so incredible, but something's not working, or you can't give them what they want, or they can't give you what you really want.
Yeah.
And there's just conflict where you can't figure it out, and you've got to end it, or you've got to evolve it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do we, first off, before you even go into that, because you've got 5 steps to doing that.
Okay. How
do you call on the one? And how do you know it's the one if you're going to end it at some point? That's the confusing thing.
Well, I think, this is important for us to realize that we live in a very mobile society that values growth and evolution.
Yes.
Right. And in a way, America is kind of torn between these 2 ideals of the stability of family and commitment and devotion. And most of us really believe in that. 90% of us are going to get married at some point in our lifetimes. But we also are a country that was kind of founded upon the ideal of the pursuit of happiness. And we are a creative bunch, and we love change, and we love evolution, and we love, personal growth and development. And those 2 things are not always the best bedfellows. So in a perfect world, we all grow together, but different people have different callings, and different people have different aspirations to how much they're willing to grow, and how they're going to navigate the tension between just wanting to be, comfortable in life and kind of set in life, or how much you're going to be risk oriented and keep, striving to become your best self. And I think, I think here in the School of Greatness, I can pretty much assume that most of us are the latter.
Yes.
And so it is going to create a lack of stability. It's going to do 2 things. It's going to create, it's going to create a lack of stability that we are going to, and it's also going to inspire us to grow.
Yes.
Right? Because we don't want to lose each other. We want to learn how to stay related. In a way, conscious uncoupling is about that. Because
it's not about losing each other?
No, look, if you have a crash and burn relationship, somebody's got a personality disorder, they're like an addict, they're like unethical with you, they're toxic, you're going to have to...
You need to cut it off.
You need to set that boundary. You're not going to be able to do that. But in many relationships, you can transition. Certainly if you have children or if you're business partners, we wanted to kind of wrap in business too, because I think, I've had 2 business breakups in my lifetime that were almost as heart-wrenching as my divorce.
Yes.
Right. They can be very, very difficult to navigate. So so you really don't want to lose people entirely. You want to do things like, one of the things I have people do is to become very conscious of the agreements that you've had as a couple.
As you had as a couple.
As a couple, like you will always prioritize me. You will always rescue me when I'm in trouble.
Yes.
That kind of thing. Or you will always love me the most.
Yes.
I will always love you the most. I will sexual fidelity, that kind of thing. We are people of our word. There was one woman that I worked with who had been divorced 10 years earlier, hadn't seen her husband in 8 years. He was already married to somebody else. She hadn't talked to him in 8 years. She had never been on a date. And when we worked together, it was because she was still, she was Catholic, so she was still kind of covertly keeping her vow of fidelity to him.
Way.
So we have these agreements with each other. And then we have to update the agreements and become conscious.
Yes.
Like, who are you going to be to me now? What are my expectations of you? What are your expectations of me? And when you start, so that's how you kind of evolve a relationship to a new healthy form. But I think you asked me how to call in the one.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much I want to learn.
I know, there's a lot that I have to say.
The challenge is, the challenge is, how do you call in the one, and then how do you know it is the one, and how do you deal with coping with when it's not the one right now, or it's not the right time, or it's not working, that it's not the one anymore for right now? It's just,
So they're different questions. So I
Yes.
think how to call in the one is about being very intentional and being more future oriented than past oriented. So a lot of us have, certain things in our histories, in our childhoods. We have certain, dynamics that were happening in our families. And so we have insecurities or we have beliefs that, I'm not good enough or I'm not wanted or men always leave or those kinds of stories that
or I can't trust people or whatever it is. I don't
Right.
have faith in humanity or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And, then, and so we're kind of like, and then we go to how am I going to have love? And there's like a sense of resignation, because it's become an identity. It's become a self-sense. So one of the things we do in Calling in the One is we look and name that identity really specifically according to each person's story. Like if your dad left when you were 5, what did you make that mean about you?
Yes. I'm not worthy, or that everyone's always going to leave me, or that
when
I get close to someone, they're going to leave.
Right, because inside that consciousness, we're going to show up in ways that then validate that story. And it's so covert, and it seems like it's just happening to us, and we don't see how it's happening through us. One of my favorite stories about this is a woman who was in her 20s, and she was a client of mine, and she met this guy, and they really